The Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I'm very pleased to make a speech in the House to support this, as Labor is this necessary piece of legislation that is being rushed through. Just briefly, in response to the previous speaker, trying to make pathetic excuses for why government sat on this for so long, I have to say that saying there are 60 pieces of legislation on the order paper, it is a very light order paper, and most select committees have a very light workload. That is no excuse. The bottom line on this is that the government, I'd say thanks to the Honourable Rick Barker, was able to pick up a piece of legislation that had been developed in wisdom back in the last Labor government, and deemed necessary, but of course parked up by the national government. This government was lucky that it could pick that up off the ground, pick up the ball, I think was the analogy used by the member over there. It's probably got flat and had to be pumped up a few times really in the last few years, but anyway, nonetheless it is still a useful piece of legislation. It is with some sadness, of course, that we read the motivators for the government in this, and it, as I've said in a previous speech, deregulation by governments has resulted in incidents and occasions that unfortunately have led to a lot of very negative outcomes. The worst, of course, being the Pike River disaster. The most costly, of course, being leaky homes. But there are now a legacy of national government deregulation experiments that have failed, and now we are bringing in place a piece of legislation that will allow inquiries to investigate why these things happened. For some people, the answer is really obvious, and prevention is always better than cure. But nonetheless, Mr Speaker, it is important that we have legislation that allows us, the member over there should be very conscious of inquiries, lots of them going on over there, PCA, but can I say that we need to ensure that inquiries are effective, are a good use of resource, and deliver the wisdom that we require from them. And we don't have these inquiries for retribution, Mr Speaker, particularly the ones that will come under this legislation. They will be, we hope, for the garnering of wisdom and the implementation of recommendations that will prevent incidents, whatever they are, big or small, occurring. The most recent one, of course, being around Fonterra and food safety. And I have to say that the Speaker himself turned down my request for an urgent debate today on the basis that this is an ongoing matter. And it's with some sadness that I accept that reality, because what deregulation of food certification, as has occurred in the dairy industry and been very successful for a long time, I acknowledge that, and I know the Speaker and the Chair himself has a great deal of wisdom in the area of dairy and his region. It has performed outstandingly well for a long time, but the industry is in a new competitive environment. It's one where there is pressure on who can get suppliers to provide the milk, and then who's going to sell into the marketplace. That competition, dare I say, drives new pressures internally, and we hope doesn't ever cause companies to take shortcuts, particularly when it comes to food safety. But if it does cause them to do that, then we need to have a proper agency that has the ability to monitor, intervene, and stop any food produce going from New Zealand that is substandard in any way. So this inquiry, of course, has been initiated by the need for an investigation into that food safety regime. And I think it will discover that there's a higher level of government oversight required. There is more resource needed. And just as my good colleague, the Honourable Annette King, comes into the House, she knows full well an independent agency, uncompromised by any other obligations, set up by the previous Labor government and absorbed into the Ministry for Primary Industries by the national government because they wanted to cut costs and deregulate. We need an independent agency that provides proper oversight without fear or favour to any part of any primary industry sector to say this food meets the specifications and is safe for us to export. Specifications of the customer, Mr. Speaker. We revealed, or we saw yesterday, another incident of not food safety, but higher levels of nitrate in a shipment of milk powder from the country than the customers wanted, than they expected. And indeed, I guess into the Chinese market, nitrates have been associated with possible contamination by melamine, actually, when you go back. That's why they're so sensitive to it. That's why when we tested here, we should have identified those high levels before it got on the ship. And that is indeed what used to happen in this country. But what we're seeing with the competitive pressure, and China is a vast and growing market with huge opportunities, and we want to deliver to them the highest quality safe food possible. But with the pressure to get out into that market, dare I say, you know, maybe we're taking, or someone's taking shortcuts, putting it on the boat, getting it into China before it's been properly tested. Now, I don't want to prejudge what the outcomes of this investigation might be, but they are very, very important. And the provisions laid down in this bill have been rightfully scrutinised by the Parliament, and we hope, you know, provided the best outcome. My colleague, the Honourable Trevor Mallard, of course, put up an SOP wanting a little more openness and transparency. I don't think that's got through, so we're going to have to trust the government that it will do this. We should not forget, though, in relation to this Fonterra inquiry, it is a ministerial inquiry. So the ministers are ultimately responsible for the outcomes, and in fact they can discuss the terms of reference with the chair. Now, okay, I'm a bit uneasy with that, I have to say. The chair is obviously appointed by the ministers, reports to the ministers, and the terms of reference are in fact dictated by the ministers, actually, in reality. So if in this particular case, as I guess, a lack of resources for a proper food safety, independent food safety agency is part of the problem here, will the ministers be honest and open enough to accept that criticism and through the inquiry and say we have to up the level of resources here? Because the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that our exports to China have rapidly grown, but the level of resourcing for oversight has not. So logic would say that something might occur at some point, and indeed it's happened very, very quickly. And we've identified another problem, and there probably will be others. And I hate to say that. I am a staunch supporter of the dairy industry, of Fonterra's position in the international marketplace. It is our biggest and best company, the most successful thing to come out of this economy. Full stop. The most successful. We cannot afford to have them falter or fail. We must support them, but they need oversight. They need guidance. The dairy industry grew because of legislation and the oversight that provided. It is now deregulated. The least we can do is provide proper oversight, objective assessment, high quality testing for all the products they produce to ensure that we continue to maintain the reputation for the highest quality, safest food from any country. Almost 40% of the world tradable product in dairy. This is huge. And I hope that the ministers in holding this inquiry don't compromise an honest outcome because they're reluctant to criticise their own funding formula that has effectively seen $26 million cut from the Ministry for Primary Industries. The minister gets up and says, world-class biosecurity system, world-class food safety system, The inquiry into Fonterra will identify whether that's true or not. I hope the government's prepared to fund the resources.
Sorry,
sure
the member's time has expired.
Yeah, Mr.
Call
Speaker.
Dr. Jiang Yang.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker. Again, I rise to take a short call